wonderful. I will pass the mic to Brother Absar, who I would like him to start with a small dua, and if he can then take it from there, inshallah. Brother Absar.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم بارك لنا في هذا اللقاء يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما. اللهم وفقنا لما تحب وترضى. آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone from myself and my wife.
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for joining us again, Sister Sabine and Brother Absar. So maybe we can start with telling our audience what they can expect today, inshallah. Brother Absar.
Okay, so basically, inshallah, today, the items that we wanted to basically discuss are partially, we're just going to go very, very briefly into the background of home schooling or home education, and then get into the practical tips as to, how a parent who is interested in homeschooling, but he or she or they are very, very nervous as to how to begin. They feel maybe not comfortable taking on this responsibility. They're not sure whether they're up to it. We're just going to be sharing, a little bit of a few tips and some, a little bit of knowledge for them. That's what we had in mind, basically.
The reason why we have brought Brother Absar and Sister Sabine is because they've helped other parents who wanted to get into this journey and maybe weren't ready. So today's session is really for us to break that barrier. If you're thinking about homeschooling, or if you're, even a bit interested, then inshallah, the idea is that maybe you learn some things today that can help you start the journey. And the journey doesn't have to be 100%, but maybe you can start working towards it. Without further delay, inshallah, I'll hand over back to Sister Sabine and Brother Absar. Jazakumullah khair.
Wa iyaakum. Okay, so like I mentioned in the beginning, we thought it might be beneficial to the audience to first of all give them a bit of background about home education, or as many people call it, homeschooling. Many people today are under the impression that homeschooling or home education is actually something new. And this is actually a misconception. Right? Many people actually, it seems like, subconsciously they seem to have in mind that, the schooling system that we have today has always existed in one form or another, right? Maybe I don't know, maybe they have in mind that, maybe even the prophets, they used to attend like a school where all the kids were sitting, and then there'd be a bell, of some kind, and, there'd be and they were all wearing uniforms. Actually, this is a major misconception. The schooling system as we have it today is less than 200 years old. The schooling system, the modern education system that we have today in most parts of the world is in fact less than 200 years old. It basically began in the 1800s. Before that, across the world, all parents were home educating their children. Okay, the child, he or she would learn their life skills, would gain the knowledge that they needed to gain from their parents or their family members, or maybe some sheikh or whatever in their community. Sheikh, maybe in the Muslims societies it would be a sheikh, in other societies it would be some other entity. No, they had. Yes.
Brother Absar, I just have just a quick, just for the audience, because we also have non-Muslims in the audience.
Yes.
Say this schooling system is only 200 years old. You mean for Muslims, or you mean generally globally?
No. Generally, Generally, the current schooling system that is in place today across the world is less than 200 years old. You can actually, I just like to reiterate one more time, as I did last time, my wife and I are most certainly not experts in homeschooling, okay? We are just sharing our experiences over here, but this is one of the surprising things that we learned on our journey of learning about home education, that it is not the schooling system that came first and then home education. Rather, for time immemorial, human beings had been home educating their children, and the modern schooling system came into being in the mid 1800s. Just, do the research yourself, Google it, as to when the modern schooling system actually arose. And one of the main reasons that the modern education system, the modern schooling system, rather, I should say, came about was a result of the Industrial Revolution, when there were factories coming about across across the modern world, and they needed factory workers. Okay, the factories required workers for their factories, and so the factories basically required the workers to have certain skills. Okay, that they should be they should be timeliness. Okay, that they should everything should be in accordance with clockwork, and everything was everything should be that they should conform to certain requirements. Basically, that the factories required that the workers just have a certain a certain level of knowledge on certain topics, okay, and certain skill set, and they should not use their imagination too much. Okay, they should not use their imagination too much. And there was this emphasis on conformance, that the factory workers must conform. Okay, you can imagine workers in an assembly line, right, where they're building a certain product on an assembly line. Can you imagine if somebody is using their imagination? Hey, let me do this with this product. Let me do this. Okay, it's gonna lead to problems with that with that product. Okay, so this is actually where the modern schooling system. And so if you look at the modern schooling system and think of a factory, a lot of the things you can see that how they relate. So just in an assembly line, where after a certain amount of time you have that bell ringing, okay, and then the workers they go for their lunch or they go for their break, etc. This is the same thing in the modern schooling system. You have that bell that indicates, okay, this lesson has come to an end. Again,
but I'm sorry, to interrupt there. Just thinking again from the audience point of view. So what? I mean, I understand what you're saying, and now it's making sense to me that the school system is designed for conformity, as you said. The bell rings, we get into class. The bell rings, we come out of class. We get assembly line. We're wearing uniforms.
Yeah.
But a lot of us parents think that's discipline, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of parents think that's not a bad thing. So maybe you can shed a bit of light. Please continue.
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. I'm not necessarily saying that it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a bad thing. I'm just trying to give a little bit of perspective that this is where the modern schooling system actually came from, meaning that it's very, very new, and it's as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Now, I'd also like to point out there's a difference between discipline and conformance. Okay, there's a difference between discipline and conformance. Okay, a disciplined child or a disciplined human being, they'd be able to set certain goals for themselves. Okay, and they would be able to work towards those goals with with a certain level of discipline, or responsibility. Okay, discipline indicates that they're responsible for themselves. However, these same children in the modern schooling system, okay, they're so-called, if you want to call it, disciplined within the school environment. As soon as you take them out of that school environment, does that so-called discipline, does that last? Okay, are they able to does that translate in the home? That are they able to be responsible at home, set goals for themselves, act responsibly, make sure that they're that they're fulfilling what they're responsible for. So this is an issue that what we often refer to as discipline is not necessarily discipline, rather it's conformity, because in that environment, it's required. If you don't conform, if you do not act the way you are required to act, then you are, punished.
If I could just add to that,
Yeah.
right? So small litmus test with this definition of discipline, because having taught in school and then having taken our children out and gone towards home education, that's something, the first question we came to, what about discipline? So the question arises, what is that definition of discipline? Just a small example. Look at the class, like for example, the teacher enters the classroom, leaves the classroom. What's that state of the classroom? This is what defines that discipline. Usually, with very few exceptions, the teacher leaves the classroom and the classroom's a mess. For the other teacher to come in, now this is classroom management, they need to settle the children. So these children need to know how to behave. Are these same children able to make a line outside and wait for their turn? Whether it's getting the bus or paying their bills. So again, there's a system in place which calls for conformity. And the word discipline now is something that you take responsibility yourself, regardless of who's watching you. It's not because the teacher walks into class or the headmaster is passing and then we straighten up. So that's not really the right definition of discipline. Yeah, but I think we've gone off to...
Yeah, anyway, but again, that was just a little bit of a background on the modern schooling system. So, I thought that might actually be useful.
But also to shed light on that is because there was a need for that schooling system at that time, and so it was into place. What we need to ask ourselves is, what is the need now? Is this same system fulfilling the needs of our children and the needs of our society, or just the future of what we see as for our children and for the community at large? Is this system fulfilling those needs? That's a question we need to ask ourselves.
Also, I'd just like to mention, again, the idea was just to give people a certain level of background, because many people might, this is the way we treat schooling today, that this is just the way things are. That, it's as if like the modern schooling system, it's like something written in stone. Education can only happen in this way. No, actually, for thousands and thousands of years since human beings existed, education was occurring. It's only a short amount of time that education has been given to our children in this particular manner. It can be done in other ways. So that was the objective, basically.
Okay, Zakla, before we move on, I'd like to ask the audience, maybe in the comments they can share with us, how many of you are currently doing home education or homeschooling, and how many of you are regular schools, just for us to get an idea. So while we're continuing in the conversation with Sister Sabine and Brother Absar, if you, as a guest on the show, if you just reply on the comments and tell us what your current status is in terms of how you're educating your children, for those of you who have children. If you don't, then I don't know why you're in this call, but that's fine. Inshallah, before we Brother Absar, I think this is a good point to maybe move to the next part, and I think you have a few slides you want to share with us, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So maybe you can share them on the screen while I see the comments that are coming in.
Yes.
So the question was, if you're currently homeschooling, or what really is your interest in this session? If you have a specific question or interest, please put it in the comments so we can try and at least address it. As we said, this session is more about how it can help you as an audience. So if you have something specific, please put it in the comments. Okay, I'm sorry, I can see your presentation.
Yeah, just 1 second. I'm just turning on the slide.
Sure.
My machine is just acting a little.
From the beginning.
Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yeah, I can see a screen. Yeah, I think everybody else can see a screen as well.
Okay, so are we ready to take this, Brother Khidher? Are we ready for the next?
Yes, please. So just for those who have joined us, we've just had a bit of introduction on the background of homeschooling or of education generally. And Brother Absar raised an interesting point that it's only about 200 years old. And now I think we're going into the crux of the discussion. For those of us who are considering home education, Brother Absar and Sister Sabine are going to share with us some tips on how we can actually break that barrier. How can we actually start homeschooling? So Bismillah, please start.
Okay, I'm just facing a technical issue.
Okay.
I think he's trying to change the slide.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I had a problem last time, so that's why I gave it to you guys to do it this time.
Okay.
I think you might find it easier to use a scroll button. Okay, Bismillah. Okay.
All right. So should I go ahead?
Yeah. You can
Okay, so I'll just take over this section. So basically, when we're talking about homeschooling or home education, home educating our children, the question arises like, why would I do this to begin with, right? Because I need clarity before I take this journey and I embark on this journey. So the question that first arises, why would I home educate my child? Because in itself, it sounds scary. That means it's just me and my child. And what am I supposed to do now, right? So that's what we're going to try to work with in a sequence. And inshallah, to the best of our ability, we'll try to share that with you. So that why is actually answered by the objectives of home educating your child or my child. So I've tried to put down different points that could different people could resonate with. So some points could be like, why would I go on this journey? Why would I take this responsibility? One could be, firstly, it could be a concern, the character of my child, right? I want my child to develop a good character as a responsible human being, right? So now this is beyond just the textbooks. Obviously, this is now with regards to the emotional state of this child, the physical state of this child, their social interaction with other people. So it's quite a holistic approach, because when you're talking about the character, obviously this is the individual, him or herself. Okay, and we look into these in a bit more detail as we go into the house. So, but before that, for example, I want to help my child acquire the necessary skills needed for living a healthy life. Now, I remember Absar, he shared something like, when we're talking about acquiring skills, we look forward. Okay, now this is skills means what? Necessary skills means the formal education that we talk about, what we consider schooling, for example, mathematics and science, and as they progress towards university, they specialize. These are the skills that we're talking about. Why? Because the reality is we're living in this world and we need certain skill sets. So this is what we were discussing about, you know, that we look forward, meaning there's progression, the different developments, there's research, the different courses happening. So we're not shy of that as long as it's something that goes against our faith.
Right.
So you're helping our child to acquire that. Helping means what? It doesn't mean that it's me, myself, and my child only, but we're looking for and tapping into different resources that help us attain that. Okay. Another objective could be living life with ihsan. What does that mean? Why have I put this in? This is something really important to us. For example, and I had a friend, she's homeschooling as well, home educating, and she gave this example. She's got like 8 boys and a daughter. All right, 8 boys. So many people are like, what about boys? That's another question that comes up. But anyway, so she says something interesting, because one of her boys is really into cooking, and she said, look, I have no issue with you becoming a chef, but guess what? You need to become a really good chef. You know, so whatever you do it with ihsan. Even if you know, my child used to tell me something which is not very conventional, meaning there's certain things in certain cultures that if you just take in certain professions, it's accepted. A doctor, an engineer, you know, something that has a certain rank in society. But for example, my child tells me, you know, I just want to become really good at graphic design. You know, I just want to be really good at this. You know, I don't have to go in towards like really, you know, basically whatever they do it with ihsan. What does ihsan means? Excellence. It's not perfection, because that's beyond mankind. Mankind does not have that quality of perfection. This is the quality of the creator, right? But what they do it with excellence. Meaning just don't do stuff. I got to write a composition, so I'll just do it so I pass. I got to just given an assignment, I'll just do it. I'll have a test, I'll just study so I can pass. That's not the attitude we want. We want them to enjoy, meaning take responsibility, ownership for their studies, and do it with excellence.
I'd just like to add something small over here. You know, what Sabine mentioned regarding ihsan. Ihsan is a quality which the Prophet ﷺ, you know, emphasized to all believers, right? You know, that you should be living with ihsan. You should be living every single thing that you do. You should be doing it with excellence. This actually brings up a very, very important point. Again, when many people think of schooling or education, they limit themselves to things like science and mathematics and English and these sorts of things. What we're trying to emphasize over here is that, yes, this is no doubt part of education. Okay, this is no doubt part of the important things that every child, every human being should learn. However, this is only a small part of the human being. This is only a small part of their education. It's like the tip of the iceberg, okay? Science, mathematics, English, all of these things, these are skills, but these skills do not encompass the totality of a child's education. This is only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to a human being than these sorts of things. Their character, their moral upbringing, okay? Discipline, like we talked about, okay? Their physical needs, okay? There's a lot more to that human being than these small few skills such as science, mathematics, computers, and these sorts of things, okay? Now, for these, in order to attain these skills, somebody actually, an educationalist explained this to us some time ago. In order to attain these skills, we look forward. Okay, we look forward to what are the latest trends, okay? What is the latest research say when it comes to things like mathematics and science and these sorts of things. However, to develop that complete human being, we don't look forward, we look backward. As Muslims, in order to develop that complete human being, we do not look forward, we look backward. And what is the proof of this? Anyone like to, would anyone like to share? Okay, well, there's not that kind of a forum, but what is the proof of this? Very famous hadith of Rasulullah sallam, khairun nas qarni, thumma alladhina yalunahum, thumma alladhina yalunahum, right? That the best people, or the best of mankind are my generation. Then those who come after them, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, and then those who come after them, okay? Meaning the best people that have ever, have ever stepped on this earth in human history were those people. This is what we as Muslims strongly believe, that the best people who walked on the face of the earth were Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the prophets, and the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we look at what kind of people we want our children to be, that's what and so we need to look back, okay? Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best nation that has been raised up for mankind, okay? So we look to them. What were they doing in their lives? What kind of people were they, okay? So for these skills, like, science and mathematics, and we look forward. We look forward to the latest research and these sorts of things. But to develop that complete human being, we look backwards. And this is why, and this is again, it just helps to emphasize, or just helps to reinforce that there's a difference between schooling and education, okay? Education is so much more than just these skills that we emphasize so much in this day and age.
I'm sorry. Just I'm sure you're going to move to the next slide, but just a quick one on this one. A lot of the parents here would say, yes, fine, we want our children to be good Muslims. We want our children, to be like the Sahabas. But that's why we have madrasas and we bring the ma'alim at home. And, at school, my expectation is that my child is getting, stuff that I can't give him at home. I want him to move. I want him to learn programming. I want him to learn how to socialize with non-Muslims. I want him to learn how to play, football, which I can't do at home. So maybe I'm sure you'll say it in the next slide, but maybe you need to give some context. That is it only for Islamic stuff, or is it generally that we're talking about?
No, absolutely. As we move ahead, we'll see.
Okay, yeah, okay, let's move ahead.
Yeah, we'll see the points as they come through. So for example, we've got again, certain things like I'm looking at it overall, and points will be covered in that. So we're looking at the child as well as an individual, meaning their personality. Many things that come across in schooling system is that children, sometimes they don't have that relationship with their siblings. They'll have it on their door, no trespassing, parents, siblings, or, brothers and sisters not allowed, and then have to skull. So you see that culture that creeps into the home. So one of the objectives could be that to develop that relationship between parents, siblings, grandparents, neighbors, so it's not just me, myself, and my friends, and that age group, but developing it beyond that. And this is what home education allows you to do.
Okay.
I
just have a comment from one of our audiences that I'd like to share. Is Teacher Doreen is one of the teachers who has been teaching a lot of homeschooled kids as well as non-homeschooled kids. And she's just had a comment which all of you can read. She says, I'm glad to be part of this. She basically says there is a big difference between the two, meaning the homeschooled and the non-homeschooled. She finds the responsibility and discipline in homeschooling kids is way ahead. So just something I found very interesting.
Yeah, this Miss
While we move on.
These are girls as well. So yeah.
Okay,
so
great.
Yeah. So like I said, it's a community, right? Anyway, so other points coming across is, this is something very important to us, is that identity within our children, meaning a strong Muslim identity, being proud of being Muslim. What does that mean? If I walk into a room, I'm not shy to say Assalamu alaikum. You know, many times you just got kids saying, hi, how's it going, right? Muslim kids amongst themselves, they don't have that salam on their tongues. Afshu salam bainakum. So these are things that were important to us, and I'm sure it's important to many parents. I would get things like, at least my child prays. At least my child can wear hijab. Now, the question I ask is, as a parent, do I say, at least my child got that 50% in math? At least my child got that 50% in science? It's not acceptable. As parents, that's not acceptable. You see, like, why? Weren't you preparing? At least you got a B, a 50? But when it comes to our identity and our deen, we're okay with that pass, because at least hijab is a 50%. At least salah, because these are things that are obligatory upon us, right? It's incumbent. So this is why education, like we said, it's beyond just the subjects, right? And we're going to include that as well. Obviously, because it's part of the education of the child, but it's not limited to that. So other objectives could be like good, strong physical fitness, right? Their health, this is really important to us. Giving back to the community. So it's just not me thinking about myself, my career, but how does this benefit those around me, my community? So they have, a sense of being a citizen, being a part of a community, and maybe even just to start off with your neighborhood to begin with, your whole household to begin with, you know? So it depends on your situation. Nurture his or her inner strengths. What does that mean? Like we talked about in the previous episode, was that learning takes place in schools, yes, but they don't necessarily tap into that individual child. And every child learns differently, and sometimes at a different pace, and sometimes something clicks at a different time. So based on that child's strengths, this is what we can identify and nurture that, and help them grow in that. And obviously we're insan, we're human beings, we have weaknesses. So another objective is to how to help them overcome these weaknesses or challenges, right? Yeah. So you recognize that. You don't say that, we just work on the strengths, but we've got weaknesses. But guess what? You've got a problem with your temper, with your anger. There's certain strategies we can adopt. You're not very organized. You're not able to plan. Let me help you do that, right? You can't meet deadlines. So these are sort of objectives that can be met.
Yeah.
Right.
Jazakallah khair. I have a few comments coming in, and again, for those who just joined us, please ask the questions you have directly on the comments. So I'll share the questions with the guests. At the moment, I have a mixture of those who are homeschooling already and some who are considering. I'd like to hear from those who are considering. If you have any specific concerns throughout the session, if you have any concerns, please raise them. And for those who just joined us, inshallah, you can put in your questions again. Continue, please, Sister Sabine and Brother Absar.
Okay, so I'm actually not sure if Sabine was going to address this later on, but some of the items that she mentioned in these slides, they're all completely relevant. However, at the same time, it is completely understandable that a parent might be thinking to him or herself or themselves that this looks like too much. Me as a parent, I don't feel I'm qualified. This often this often comes up. Me as a parent, how can I in any way do justice to my child's education? How can I teach my child the way a quote-unquote qualified teacher could teach my child? And actually, this is, believe it or not, this is a big misconception. Okay, and this is a myth. Okay, that a parent cannot teach their children, and that a teacher teaching in school is much more effective than a parent. This is actually a misconception. The number one thing that you have to realize as a parent is that nobody can be as passionate about your child's education than yourself. Okay, no teacher except in maybe very rare cases, okay, no teacher is going to be as passionate and desire their child to succeed or their as compared with you. It's not going to happen, okay? So first of all, you already have an advantage over the average teacher, that you really want your child to succeed. You genuinely want your child to succeed. You're not simply doing it for a paycheck, okay? Number two, that one-on-one attention is just not there. You know, when a teacher has 15, 20 children in her class, there's no way that she can give your child that one-on-one attention that child sometimes might need in order to fully digest that subject. The other thing is that oftentimes teachers in a school, most of their time actually goes into disciplining children, you know, classroom management, you know. Exactly, you know, oftentimes a lot of the time is just like telling this kid to sit down, you know, to stop doing that, you know, stop doing this. And maybe, you know, maybe 15, 20 minutes is actually spent in teaching that subject, okay? So from what we have, again, we're not experts, but from our experience, any parent who's passionate can easily fulfill the education requirements of a primary school student. And again, you have that option as a parent. Yes, if your child, you know, if you're not a hafiz, okay, and your child and you want your child to be you know, a hafiz, then of course you can ask a tutor to come and teach your child the Quran, teach your child these subjects that you have not mastered yourself, okay? But that education, that complete you know, tarbiyah of your child should be, you know, or we would recommend that, you know, you take responsibility for that. So hopefully that, yeah.
Brother, sorry, Jazakallah khair. I just want to keep it engaging, and I have a few comments. But just to recap what you said, I think you've, at least what I captured, two very interesting points is nobody is going to be as committed as the parent, is what you're saying. This outsourcing phenomena that we have, once you spend time with your kids and go to the schools, you will see that the parent, no matter how good a teacher is, the commitment will never be the same as a parent themselves. This is the first thing that I got from what you said. Right. And the second thing you said is also the inefficiency of the schooling system, because you're dealing with 30 children of different, or even 20 children of different calibers. Yeah. So managing, I think Sister Sabine mentioned that, managing the class in terms of disruptions, in terms of, you know, making sure that everybody's on the same page is very inefficient. And, yeah. and I like that, because I met somebody very recently, and he said, all my life, I've been trying to get my kids away from devices. And now my wife is supervising my child on the computer for 8 hours a day, because the school has insisted that they must spend time on a computer because of COVID. So just very quickly, there's two questions that came in, which I think are very relevant. One is asking about the legality of homeschooling. Right. I'd let the guest answer, but let me also just give you a bit of caution. Our guests today are not the experts in terms of homeschooling, in terms of the technical side. We hope to bring in next week's session somebody from the Homeschooling Association of Kenya. So we're working on that for the third session, inshallah. And I think she'd be able to share more light on the legality of it and how you can overcome that. And I think Absar and Sister Sabine will talk about curriculum and certification, which will somehow give you a bit of comfort. But legality, maybe we can raise it for the next. Unless Brother Absar and Sister Sabine, you want to answer that question.
No, that's perfectly fine, Brother Khidher. I think we can take that for the next, yeah.
Exactly. And then there's another question we have from somebody saying that I have 4 children, mashallah, and I think the question is about they're concerned whether they will be able to give the right level or will they end up diluting the content, because the person has mentioned they have 4 children and right. The concern is about will they be giving them quality education. Maybe you can give us a bit of an answer on that one, Brother Absar and Sister Sabine.
Right. So, you know, that's the interesting thing is that we try to use the word facilitator. That's our role. We facilitate the children. What does that mean? It's like you're giving them certain guidelines, motivating them, helping them. But it's amazing how much they end up doing independently once they're motivated to learn something. So you as a parent, even if they're 4 children or 6 children, there's a lot of learning happening amongst them. There's stuff we've learned from our kids, it's amazing. Once they're interested, because they're not limited to that textbook, they open other books or they go to different websites, they read different things, or they watch your video. And there's a lot that's happening. So not everything is on your shoulders, but yes, we have that responsibility of making that environment in the home and instilling this ownership within the children, building that in, that this is something that we're working towards. This is something and it's amazing when the parent does get involved in the education of this child, they start learning about that child, things that we didn't look at the child, like basically as a child, you had certain interaction, but with the learning, you and your child, you end up learning things and exploring things that you might have not even planned for that lesson because of the questions that come up. So again, coming back to what you had said previously, Brother Khidher, regarding the schooling system with the hours that are put in, or this screen time of 8 hours, and then looking at what happens in the school setting with classroom management, that's why people get shocked when we say you can take 2 hours a day and cover this content and you'll be fine. As long as it's regular, you have a schedule and you're following that regularly and you're going towards something, you don't need see the amount of time wasted in a school, the breaks that come in, the classroom disruptions, settling, one teacher leaving, another teacher entering, settling the class. You take away that time, and if you take on quality one-on-one time, 2 hours is on average sufficient to cover the content. And this is what we've been doing.
Yeah. Dawood has asked a question about, his concern is that if he starts home educating or homeschooling his children, he
Yes.
might impact the quality because he thinks they're at a certain level. So maybe I remember the first session you guys mentioned something about that if you're not able to deliver a specific technical subject, then it's okay to outsource. And we had Teacher Doreen on the call a few minutes ago. So maybe you can explain that not all the pressure is not on the parents, right?
So first and foremost, yes, exactly. Just to reiterate, okay, obviously, if you want your child to learn Arabic, for example, okay, my wife and I are Pakistani background, okay, very few, Arabic is not spoken in Pakistan, so obviously before, my wife completed her studies, her Islamic studies, okay, we could not teach Arabic to our children on our own. So of course, for these sorts of things, you can outsource, okay? You can have a tutor to teach them this particular subject, okay? It's not all on you. What we're trying to emphasize over here again is that education is not simply limited to tutoring, okay? Education of the child is much more than tutoring them on a certain language or a certain skill. And by the way, you have lots and lots of online resources now, which you can also utilize for their education. I think everyone over here, or if you haven't heard of it, then you should actually go and look into it. There's a very wonderful online resource. It's called Khan Academy, Khan Academy, right? It's run by this Khan Academy. Have you heard of it? Khan Academy?
No, it's not run by me.
No,
we're not marketing.
No. It's actually run by this guy. His name is Salman Khan. Okay.
Not the actor.
No, I'm just putting a leg up, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Alhamdulillah. No, but this wonder even Bill Gates appreciated. Bill Gates, his daughter was having trouble with certain topics in school, and this guy Salman Khan, basically he started up this resource where, because he used to teach his young like maybe nieces and nephews, they used to have trouble in school, and so he used to like teach them how to do certain things, and
you see that's what's interesting. Again, it brings us back to, maybe you can't teach something, but hey, your brother could, or your relation could. It's not limited. Again, it doesn't mean that it becomes a burden, but it's open. It's amazing. For example, my mother is really good with dressmaking. She's a designer. And so my daughter took some courses under her. So do you see what's happening? They're learning skills from people around them. They can get attached to different internships. You might have somebody who's a carpenter that who can come and do a bit of carpentry with your kids. So now this is going towards curriculum. But that's what I'm trying to say, that it's not limited to the parent. The parent is not burdened with this task all by themselves. but they reach out and they make use of this wonderful world with all these resources that are available.
I have a few more questions that have come in. I don't know if you guys can we take these questions and then we go to the next slide?
Yeah, of course. The idea is to familiarize everyone with this. So I mean, the more the merrier, inshallah.
So we have a question regarding curriculum. I think you're going to cover that shortly. I think that there's a concern from a sister who's raised. I think Sister Asra has said that my kids are just 6. So what happens when my child doesn't like any particular subject like maths or physics and doesn't want to give it more time? And then in future, when it's time for the O levels or A level exams, won't they be under too much pressure to try and catch up? I think she's relating to the point that where you said with home education, you let kids also work on what they're good at their pace. So I think that's where the concern is coming from Sister Asra.
Brother Khidher, is a child 6 years old or is a child in grade 6?
Are just 6. I think she's saying the child is 6 years old.
Okay, so that actually comes to what we're going to present next. Yeah,
okay,
so we
good.
move to
So I'll just go to one more question then. Sister Asra, wait for that answer. I think we also have a question or a comment again from teacher Doreen, who says, it's good to understand that in homeschooling, you move to the next topic once the child understands the last one.
Right.
I taught a child who got E's in school and ended up with B's and A's after he started homeschooling. The kids also get to develop their talents more when homeschooling. For instance, I think she's mentioning your children and my children. Thank you very much. So the background you see behind, I'll just make a point on this one. The background you see behind, I have no idea how that was done. That was my son Hamza, who's actually done my studio. So that's part of his homeschooling talents, alhamdulillah. So I think Sister Sabine, maybe you can address this as well. Curriculum part is coming, right?
Right, but before I get to that, if I could ask Hamza why we don't have a nice background.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hamza.
He only did half his homework. The cat ate the other half, huh?
Right. Okay. All right. So where do I begin? Okay. So the question from Sister Nasra regarding the children. Firstly, before we even go to the house, where do I begin? I need to understand that my children's responsibility, my education is my responsibility. The first thing is that I need to understand this, that it is my responsibility. Before if I start even looking for the schools, I need to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, oh, you who have believed. Basically, you believe now. What you need to do, protect yourselves and your families from a fire whose fuel is people and stones. This is Surah Al-Tahrim, verse number 6. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, the creator, the one who created us, nourishes us, and he's sustaining us. He's telling us, what is it that we need to do once you believe is protect yourselves and your families. So what does that mean? Protection of myself and my families means what? Obviously, this is not going towards what is permissible and leaving that which is not permissible. So, and this is in a very broad context, right? So education falls under basically my children's tarbiyah, their upbringing, whether it's obviously the technical aspect is math and science, but beyond that is my responsibility. So whether I do it myself or I outsource it, but what I tap into is my responsibility, all right? So this is what we need to understand. This is primarily the parent's responsibility. Challenges we face in Islamic schools, for example, is parents put their kids into the school and then they think their job is done, even as a Muslim parent, right? Thinking that their job is done. No, I used to have questions like, my child is forgetting their du'as. Du'as means, their supplications for entering the bathroom, for going to sleep, before they eat, when they're changing their clothes. So, I used to teach these things. And I asked the parent, where is this child when they're reciting these du'as? Where is this child in context of that du'a? And they start thinking to themselves and they're like, at home, because obviously the child's changing clothes at home, the child's going to bed at home. So it's like, then where is this being applied? We can help your child memorize those du'as, but guess what? The application, now this is tarbiyah, right? This is your responsibility. So we can't just wash our hands and say, look, I put my kid in a good school and my job is done. We need to understand our responsibility. Secondly, now moving on, this is now I think hopefully going to address the sister's question. This is a hadith, a very famous hadith, right? Muslim educationists use this as a benchmark. When they talk about education, formal education for their children is this hadith. And many of us are probably aware of this, where the Prophet ﷺ tells us to, muru awladakum bis-salah wa hum abna'u sab'i sinin. Now this is a commandment. Muru means it's an amr, it's a command, telling them, tell your children to pray when they become 7 years old. What does that mean? Tell them to pray. Now the command is starting now, all right? What does this mean? We just take this portion. It means this is what they use as formal education, SubhanAllah. What is happening before that? That's the question, because if we look at the hadith, it moves ahead. وَضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ أَبْنَاءُ عَشْرِ سِنِينَ. And now it has become, now you can reprimand them. How? Obviously beating them, and the description of beating is gentle. It's not what we think of as a beat. But you do that when they become 10 years old. Now this is reprimanding them. The consequences kicks in at 10 years old. Between this age of 7 to 10 was that training period. All right. This is for salah. And this is what they use as a benchmark for formal education. And then the hadith was ahead to say and arrange their bed separately, basically at the age of 10. So this is the hadith that is being used for us to define when formal education begins. The question arises, this is what the age of 7, right? What's happening before that? What's happening with this child from birth to the age of 7? All right. And subhanAllah, it's really interesting. It's learning by observation. The child is living life with you, but through observation. What does that mean? Just the way a child learns a language, okay? So what do they do first? There's a listening, right? There's this listening happening, 2 plus, or maybe a little earlier. Then they start articulating. But before that, something was already happening. That child had been listening, the comprehension was settling in, then they started expressing. We can't think that the minute they spoke was that the first time they understood something. Of course not. And we know that, right? Like when we tell them to do something, they'll do it. We'll say, no, they'll understand, do this, but they might not be able to express themselves. So that learning is happening, okay? And this is all informal learning. What does that mean? There's a lot of free play, How does this help this child? And we took this example of the schools in Finland, is that the learning is going on before 7, but guess what? The formal education, what does that mean? I'm at my desk, my writing kicks in, right? This is 7 plus now. What's happening before that, though? Parents are going to get worried. What am I going to do with my child? The child, what are we going to do with this child all this while? A lot of free play, and free play has got, it's endless. Basically, you've got so much material that you can work with. How does this help the child? Because the child is at the stage of absorbing, the little sponges, they're absorbing from the environment, they start comprehending and expressing. We did this a lot with our girls, a lot. How did this help him? For example, what does free play do? Free play could be playing with their toys. It could be out in the garden. It could be on the swings. It could be with crafts. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not structured that they have to sit down and memorize their letters and then write it on a book where we're like, oh my God, the handwriting is horrible. They're 3 and we're expecting them to like make the most perfect A, for example. What does free play do is what they're doing is they're formulating ideas in their mind. And when they formulate it in their mind, this is their story. They're plotting their story. Okay, this is now, before you write a composition, you need to have a plot. This is going on in the child's mind. And they start expressing it through their toys and their games, and they're exploring, and the imagination goes wild, right? And they're allowed to do that. And so this is what's going to aid them when they come towards the formal education. That stage has already happened. It's matured. But when we rush it, it's premature. We expect them to start writing their sentences by the age of 5. We haven't even allowed that stage to have settled in and matured, right? I'll give you an example. If we take the example of salah, right, like we took earlier in the hadith, the child is told, we've been told to command them to pray at 7. Many Islamic schools have their children doing wudu at 3 and 5. 5 years old, they're making wudu. And this is becomes so taxing for the teacher, for the child. Water is going, the break is going to go. The child is stressed. At the age of 5, they need to make that perfect wudu, and then they have to go and pray. This is not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We've been told, command them. What does that mean? The formal instruction starts at 7. That training period is between the age of 7 to 10 is that period. So they miss a salah, they forget, they're not able to pray Isha. It's okay. Let them start with what's easier. Asr comes in first, maybe they'll have what's easy for the child. Gradually add in. Do you understand? From 7 to 10 years of age. Now by 10, if they don't pray, now is when you reprimand them. What happens before 7? They see their parents praying, right? Or the household members praying. Now this child is excited. The girl pulls on her hijab. The boy wants to put the cap on. They're role playing, they're imitating, but we're not commanding them to pray. You want to join us in Salah? Tafaddali, you're most welcome. Come join us, pray with us. But we're not going to say, did you pray? You know, time is going for Maghrib. Have you prayed? And this child is 5, 6-year-old. And then what do they do? They run away. When they're mature and they have that choice, they run away.
MashaAllah. I just want to quick check. Sorry, Sister Sabine, to
yeah, sorry, I can keep going on.
No, Jazakallah khair. We have two options. We've passed our scheduled time. I want to hear from the audience whether we should continue for another 10 minutes or would they like us to try and conclude. We do have a few questions. So I'll allow the audience to just give me a private vote if you'd like us to continue for 10 minutes. But while we're doing that, Sister Sabine, can I ask some questions that have come across?
Yes, absolutely.
And then if we decide to stop it here, then we could post some of the questions on the Facebook page, and we are going to continue next week anyway. Okay. So I just while I'm hearing from the audience, there's a question that I've got regarding what subjects would you recommend to start with?
Yes.
And that's one of the questions. And then somebody also asked, how do I go about putting in a routine?
Right.
What would be your recommendation?
Right.
Okay.
So that was actually what we're coming to next. When the first question, can you repeat that, Brother Khidher?
So the question was, what are the subjects you would recommend to start with? Somebody's looking into getting into home education.
Right.
I'm putting myself in their shoes. They don't know where to start. So they're saying, what would be your advice in terms of how do I go about it?
So basically, preschool, like our definition is preschool and all. Let's take that from 7 and below. Okay, let's keep that in context. Let's assume 7 and below is preschool. Kindergarten, if you want to call it. I used something called the classical method. It's actually a book. I had it here. It's a really big, nice book it's called the Classical Method of Education. They have this interesting framework, basically 3 divisions, okay? So from kindergarten up to the age of the 3rd grade, basically. This is called the language stage. This is where they form, they're like little parrots. They're able to memorize a lot. So that's why usually you see times table is taught at that time. The grammar stage, it's called the grammar stage. So there's a lot of comprehension forming in. So if you want to homeschool your child, remember by primary means 6th grade, right? Grade 6. There are 3 subjects that they need a command on. Math, English, and science. That's the 3, right? This is what is the minimum. You as a parent, when you're home educating, for example, for us, history was something really important to us. I did math till like A-level math. And when I went ahead, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, where do I apply that in my real life? Unless I go towards mathematics as like a university degree, I couldn't see it in my day-to-day life. But guess what? I was detached with world history, like what's happening in the world today. So the system, again, is designed in such a way that there's less emphasis on things that are real life related, meaning you detach people from history and identity, you detach them from who they are, right? So there's so much emphasis on certain subjects that take up so much time, and then they detach you from the rest. So the basic is like math, science, and English. That's something for primary that has to be covered. The rest is up to you. You can supplement that with languages. You can supplement that, for example, for us with history. You want social studies, geography. You want the children to understand how the world works, different cultures. So the minimum from primary is math, English, and science, if you're following the British system, right? This is what we're familiar with. And then obviously that opens up towards grade, towards just before O-levels and stuff, and then the subjects increase. Yeah.
That was helpful. I think we have a question also on, you mentioned a book a few minutes ago. Is there a specific book you
a classical method? Maybe you can post it on Facebook. I'll post that on Facebook, inshallah.
Okay, yeah, that would be useful. We'll post it on Facebook. And then we have another question here also on, somebody says, I agree with free play before 7 years of age, but then what about after that?
You know what, they mature. They've done so much of it that they start maturing themselves, they start settling. And this is what we've seen with our 4 girls. They start assuming things that they get interested. Now they want to write. And it's not like they haven't been doing it before. They were doing it, but there wasn't so much pressure on them that they need to have attained this much by this age. Little children at their desks, they're writing, their hand is tired. No, you got to finish your homework. Rub that's not neat enough. Write it again. And then they're so exhausted that when it kicks in for them to do it now, right, which is known as the logic stage. That's the next stage in the classical education. So they're not even open anymore. Now it's just homework, close my books. Am I done? Can I close my books now? You know, that's it. You know, so you've just killed that interest. Same thing, and this is again tarbiyah as well. Islamic tarbiyah, meaning even this, you know, like Islamic studies, for example, we approach it in the similar manner, such that I just need to know fiqh, I need to know seerah. Just so I do history and I do science and I do math, it's become another subject. How is that connection happening? And this is a question we ask with Islamic schools, that why don't I just put my child in a madrasa? Why don't I just put them in an Islamic school and this work is done for me? Guess what? They might be memorizing 100 hadith, they might be doing all the ahkam of fiqh, but illa mashallah, has that effect settled into that child? You know, like seerah, sometimes you look at Islamic studies books, they talk about seerah, and they just started it, and guess what? Term 1 is only up to here. Term 2, we're going to do something else. And then that book stops. And they just so it becomes so compartmentalized, like the schooling system. And that's what we've done with our Islamic studies, that connection is lost, that spirit is lost. And I don't think the reason for these subjects is like a grade in math and science, right? It has to have that effect on that individual. So this is where seerah, for example, should be read. Ar-Rahiq al-Makhtoom, When the Moon Split, you know, these books, let them read them as books. The way we want them to read novels, let them read books on these things. And the other, you know, the exams, you know, that's not the objective with these subjects, right? And they will, inshallah, if need be, they will.
I got comments, and most people want us to continue, and we're getting a lot of questions, which is fantastic, mashallah. I am requesting, because this is a series and we want to keep to the time, inshallah.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask us to make closing remarks, Sister Sabine and Brother Absar. But just for the audience, I really like the energy on this session, mashallah. It's been fantastic. Please sign up on the Facebook group page and keep it active. We had a comment from some people before that, why do us Muslims, we don't speak up, we don't ask. So I encourage you, please go onto the Facebook group, ask a question, post it, go live if you have to. Just make it a small community center. That's the objective. There's a lot of information that we want to share. And inshallah, for the next session, we will also bring in one of the experts on the legal side as well. But before I conclude, I'd like to give it to Sister Sabine and Brother Absar. First of all, thank them for their time. They will be with us next week. Can you give us closing comments, Sister Sabine and Brother Absar? 1 minute, and then inshallah we'll continue next week.
Okay. I mean, nothing in particular. I don't have anything specific in particular. I just wanted to reinforce one small thing that Sabine spent a lot of time talking about how, you know, when you put your child, again, I'd also like to emphasize again that, you know, we're not against the schooling system in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot of pros to the schooling system, but for us, we just thought homeschooling is better. And again, I just like to raise one thing. What happens when our Islamic studies just become another subject, and oftentimes in schools, they're just treated as another subject. So for example, in many schools, they have, you know, maybe they might have a subject on the Islamic character, right? That the character that every Muslim should have, and every child knows, every Muslim knows that Muslims should keep their promises, right? This is something that all children learn. You know, there's so many ayat in the Quran. You know, right? Yeah. So, but how many of us actually apply that in our lives? You know, Sabine is telling me, okay, close it off now. How many of us actually apply that in our lives? Muslims, unfortunately, are well known across the world that Muslims do not keep their promises, okay? But if it's being taught as a subject in school, why aren't they? Again, because it is not, it's not being, you know, it's not becoming part of their character. I just wanted to reinforce that. And Sabine, you want to add?
Yeah, just from on my end, to be continued. Really, I can't do justice to this topic. You know, my formal education hasn't even kicked in by presentation. I'm sorry, I'm really passionate about this topic, so I don't realize the time. But yes, I would love to shed more light on this. This is the last slide for the presentation. So maybe then in the next episode, we could just touch upon this before I could request that, yeah. Before
we have allowed more questions and we've tried to answer them, so it's got a bit longer, but it's good. I think let's take it on to the Facebook page. And we will also be sharing the recorded version. So please share it with your colleagues and family who haven't been able to join us today. And with that, inshallah, we request you for your du'as. And please keep the page alive. Ask your questions. We'll try and address them next week at the same time on the same channel, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum
Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Ameen.
Shukran.